welcome to the second episode of the LeadHerSuite Podcast. I am excited that everyone is participating today and being a part of the 3 barriers executive leaders need to break through to ensure and to empower women of color. We're starting just a few seconds early, but I'm welcoming all of you. If you can hear me, please let me know. Give me a thumbs up by reacting and letting me know that you can hear me clearly. I welcome everyone that is here right now, so I'm excited. Thank you, Maria Eve, for letting me know that you can hear me clearly. We're going to go ahead and get started. Again, welcome to the second episode of the LeadHerSuite Podcast. I am your host, Karlyn D. Henderson, and I am the CEO of Poimena Consulting. Poimena is a boutique leadership and development solutions firm that serves Fortune 1000 companies with talent management and leadership development strategies in attracting, retaining, engaging, and advancing women of color. So today we want to talk about the 3 barriers executive leaders need to break through to empower women of color. So just to share with you briefly my story, while I worked in a supply chain department of a Fortune 100 company, I noticed that I was the only, and maybe some of you who are listening can identify with that. I was the only in the room, sometimes the only black, the only female, and other times the only black female. As I reflected on those experiences, I realized that I missed out a lot of opportunities in my career, but today all is not lost. I now consult with chief talent management executives like CHROs, CDEIs, CLOs, and CPOs, and etc. to share the benefit of hiring, engaging, developing, and advancing women of color within their organizations. Likewise, I coach and train women of color who work within those companies to be ready now candidates for critical leadership roles. So let's get started. Today in most workplaces, women of color feel underpaid, underappreciated, undersupported, undervalued, and alone, especially within the corporate setting and in male-dominated industries. Despite the barriers that they face, women of color are substantially more likely than white women to say that they are interested in pursuing executive leadership roles, according to COPL. Furthermore, women of color are more likely than white female peers to have clear long-term career goals. Their primary motivation for success is to empower other women within their organization to help them climb that leadership ladder. I celebrate those organizations who have created initiatives that empower ready now women of color to lead and thrive, as women of color are eager to engage in leadership. However, if women of color are so eager to pursue senior and executive roles, what's stopping them? What are the barriers that are hindering their success? Well, there are a lot of barriers that women of color face inside and outside the corporate space, many of which senior executives may be aware of and may not be aware of. Awareness followed by action must be a priority for women of color to provide a safe space that celebrates diversity, inclusion, equity, and belonging. For the sake of time, we're going to explore 3 of the barriers that have showed that the reasons for the gap between men and women in multifactorial and deep-seated problems that have been around for multiple generations. Furthermore, the beliefs and the perceptions are held by both men and women. It's these reasons that make the barriers for women of color face difficult to address. To get started, we talk about women of color in leadership positions where they can best utilize their skills. Companies have identified and acknowledged the obstacles and barriers women face. Research from IBM Institution for business value have found that 1 in 3 women of color feel that they are less empowered and less supported to overcome professional challenges than the population of the employees overall and what they face. Which brings us to our first barrier. It is a structural barrier. Barrier number 1, the mentorship, the sponsorship, the coaching, and the networking gap. And maybe some of you can identify with those gaps. There is a lack of access to mentors, sponsor, coaches, and networking opportunities to advance women of color. Building professional relationships within an influential senior and executive leader is important for the success of anyone in their career, and specifically for women of color. Maybe they don't feel comfortable approaching senior leaders. Women of color don't feel comfortable approaching senior leaders, and as a result, they don't get the opportunities to advance within their career. Senior executive leaders, on the other hand, may not, if rarely, if ever, have Black people in their personal and professional circles where they feel uncertain and don't have a level of comfort interacting with women of color within their peers and within their circles. Another challenge that women of color deal with is the lack of support. Research shows that younger women of color have less access to mentoring, sponsoring, and coaching opportunities than their older counterparts. Research also indicates women of color are more ambitious and more likely to say that they want to advance in their companies other than their counterparts, but are less likely to find mentors, sponsors, and coaches who will aid them in the climb to the leadership ladder. Fostering these type of relationships within the organization can help women of color gain access to rooms where decisions are made. Mentors and coaches and sponsors can also help women of color develop the business acumen and the core competencies that help them succeed and advance up that leadership ladder. So what can executive leaders do to make a difference? The breakthrough strategy of number 1 to barrier number 1 is companies must formalize and prioritize mentorship, sponsorship, coaching, and networking opportunities for women of color. It has to be more than just a check the box initiative. It has to be the type of initiative where there is a real experience for everyone involved. Although one challenge may be for some companies that launching a formal initiative is that there aren't enough women of color in the senior or executive roles to mentor and be sponsors and to be coaches for the up and coming women of color. According to McKinsey and Company, within high growth, high-paying industries, Black people overall are underrepresented. Thus, companies must provide these support initiatives regardless of race. There has to be programs in place, initiatives in place to help the women of color regardless of what they are facing in the workplace. As I have shared in a previous episode, I worked in a Fortune 100 company within a male-dominated industry. My mentor and my sponsor were both white males, and they helped me to gain the skill sets and the advancement of my career, and it was very helpful. Another breakthrough for companies should support internal growth opportunities, continue professional development and competency training, and retention and promotion policies must be addressed in order to have women of color climb that leadership ladder. So if you have any questions or comments, feel free to jot them down, and then we will address them at the end of our session just before the 30 minutes are up today. So barrier number 2, institution practices and structures which include various types of unconscious gender bias and can cause which causes a lack for women of color from filling the leadership pipeline. Unconscious gender biases remain a significant barrier to women's careers and advancements. Gender bias occurs when someone holds beliefs or stereotypes about a group that are inconsistent with the behavior and the thoughts to be necessary to succeed in a specific role. For example, a woman of color could be in a senior vice president role and could be an excellent leader. However, if her team does not support her because she's a woman and is believed to be less than because of her gender, then she will be unsuccessful in that role. According to another report by McKinsey & Company, it is confirmed that bias barriers are holding women of color back rather than overt sexism. Gender bias and the mindsets of managers can prevent women from advancing into those leadership positions of which I believe they deserve. Many companies have taken steps to facilitate women's career growth, which we do commend, but more can be done to identify and overcome unconscious gender bias to truly give women and men an equal chance to advance into leadership. Other factors in which unconscious bias may hinder the career advancement of women of color includes performance evaluations, stretch project assignments, and leadership development programs. So now that we've identified the barrier number 2, we want to look at the breakthrough strategies companies and executive leaders can execute to help women of color and to empower them. Unconscious gender bias can exist in both individual and organizations. However, there are methods companies can implement to minimize unconscious gender biases from influencing an individual's decision. Companies can ensure that hiring and promoting processes extend equal opportunity to men and women. For instance, blind evaluation, including hiding a job applicant's physical attributes and prevent implicit bias. Second, structured recruitment and performance evaluations can exist, helping the candidates who are evaluated according to relevant and predetermined criteria. Third, disclose pay scales and benefits. Last, organizations can institute unconscious bias training along with their diversity training programs. They should not be lumped into one, but unconscious bias training should definitely be an extension of the diversity training program. There's no one-size-fits-all solution for unconscious gender bias because we never know what the root of that gender bias is within that individual. But I've learned, and as I work with clients, we support companies and people who aim to reduce the impact of unconscious gender bias in the workplace through understanding the risk factors, identifying specific threats, and co-partner with them to implement specific measures that they will not deal with and have risk as a result of dealing with unconscious bias. So barrier number 3 may be a more personal limitation or barrier than what most people may think of when they want to empower women of color. So it is the individual mindset or the limitation women of color put on themselves. This is a barrier that executive leaders need to break through in order to help women of color. Where you're wondering, well, it should be upon the individual, but if training could be provided, that would be wonderful. Many of you may be familiar with the imposter syndrome, where people believe that they're not good enough or they're persistent in their inability to believe that one's success is well deserved. It also can include people who involve feelings of fraud despite one's awesome achievements. Imposter syndrome and self-doubt are just examples of the barriers of the individual mindset. Another example is volunteering and participating in non-promotable activities. Where you may ask, well, what does non-promotable activities include? Well, it includes getting coffee, taking notes, picking up the donuts, helping with new hires, planning the holiday party, all of those things that help the company run smoothly, but don't have any impact on your role within the organization. Next is a limited mindset. As women of color, most have been socialized most of their lives to act a certain way. Keep your heads down, work hard. Put family and community first and above your own needs. Do as you are told. Don't talk back. Follow the traditional paths of career success, but still climb the corporate ladder. Make the family proud. Maybe some of these statements and other statements may have come to your mind and they may sound familiar. But these are limiting beliefs that hinder us from moving forward and being successful in our respective corporations or even our businesses. So a breakthrough strategy number 3, I want to challenge you to break that mold of thinking. I want to encourage you to think bigger. However, I know when we dare to dream bigger than our expectations that we place upon ourselves, it can be very, very stressful. So as a leadership development coach, I coach and mentor women of color to meet and exceed their goals and their expectations. If you want to make your career dreams a reality, whether you are in corporate America or you are your own business leader, you must believe in your very core that you will find a way to achieve success according to what you say success looks like and what success is. There is no 10 steps to a better mindset. Yet it comes down to believing in yourself and having the courage to step out of your comfort zone. This takes practice, insight into yourself, and time. However, it is very achievable. How can organizational leaders help women of color in their company? By providing the coaching and mental toughness training needed to succeed. As a mental toughness coach and a leadership coach, I help women of color identify and understand their belief system and help them to reach and exceed where they want to be in their career and in their lives. So let's recap just before we bring someone on stage who may have a question or a comment. So barrier number 1, there is a mentor, sponsor, coaching, and networking gap. Breakthrough strategy number 1, to formalize and prioritize mentor, sponsoring, coaching, and networking opportunities for women of color. Barrier number 2, unconscious bias that causes a lack of women of color being filled in the leadership pipeline. Breakthrough strategy number 2, although there is no one-size-fits-all solution for unconscious gender bias, companies can provide training, structural changes to minimize unconscious bias through growth opportunities, continual professional development and competency training, and retention and promotion policies. Barrier number 3, women of color's limited thinking. How can we break through with the strategy number 3? Companies can invest in the training and coaching necessary to help identify and replace the source of the limiting belief that women of color have so that their companies can thrive. Key takeaways: executive leaders must 1, commit to an authentic and informed commitment. Number 2, develop a strategy that is workable for everyone, of course, inclusion for women of color. And number 3, hold leaders accountable through linking results to performances and bonuses. Yes, how does it impact the bottom line? How does it impact their paycheck directly? Now, the stage is open for comments and questions around the 3 barriers executive leaders can break through to empower women of color. If you want to raise your hand, you can join me on stage and share your comment or question. I know that I went through very quickly through several of the barriers and the strategies that companies can work with. And so if you have any questions or comments, I welcome the opportunity for you to come on stage. Just raise your hand using the react button on your phone or on your computer, and you can join me on stage for any comments or questions. Okay, so we don't have any questions. So if you are interested in working with Poimena Consulting as a executive who wants to fill the company pipeline with ready now women of color, you can contact me at poimena.com strategy session. There's an online form that you can fill out, that you can fill out that information and contact me, and we could discuss how we can get women of color in your leadership pipeline. Or if you are a woman of color who aspires to be a leader and become ready now within your organization, or to increase your role within your own business, you can contact me at that same link, poimena.com strategy /strategy session. Both interested parties can contact me on the same webpage, poimena.com /strategy session. So I want to thank all of you who participated on the LeadHerSuite podcast. I'm honored by your time and your input spent with me today. Until next time, you can find the episodes to this link and other episodes at LeadHerSuite.com. That's www.LeadHerSuite.com. Hey, I'm Karlyn Henderson, your host and the CEO of Poimena Consulting. You have a great day, and again, thank you for your participation and your attendance. Thank you.